Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new Bible study video. Actually, what we're doing is we're picking up from where we left off. This will be the Flat Earth, Part 2, Section B. Okay? In the last video, we went over a whole lot of stuff. The analemma, the Selenian eclipse, triangulation, certain flight paths, time zones. We touched on a lot of stuff. I couldn't go in as deep as I wanted to because of time constraints, but that's okay. Hopefully, it's just motivating you to do some research for yourself. And that's what you should do. Don't take my word or anybody else's word for it. Look at the evidence for yourself and draw your own logical conclusions. Also, take a look at what the Bible says, okay? And see if the science lines up with what this says, because this is the leading and the final authority on all matters. I don't care what it is. All right. So today we are going to continue our journey of disproving this globe model and hopefully get you persuaded to the truth of a flat earth. All right. I left this stuff up because actually I just finished the other part, but you're going to see it a week later, this one. But let's go over our verses really quickly. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. The gospel, the means by which we are saved, trusting on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Romans 3:25, trusting, putting our faith in that atoning blood. That is how we get saved. All right? In Ephesians 1:13, knowing that once you're saved, you are always saved. You cannot lose your salvation. Now, I always say that salvation is twofold. We just talked about the what, the who. You have to know who Jesus is. You have to know that Jesus is God in the flesh. Excuse me, if you do not know, if you do not believe that Jesus is God in the flesh, you are not saved. And if you are not saved, you are not going to heaven. Okay? And I don't want to see that for anyone. Excuse me. So I pray that you will get to this point. All right? So today we're going to jump back into the flat earth. Part 2, Section B. All right? And we're going to start off with another verse. Last time we started off with Genesis 1:1. And we've been talking a lot about science and how following the science isn't always the wise thing to do, because science has been manipulated. Science now is about perpetuating lies, even in the face of real evidence, as we see here. But we were warned about that in the Bible. So go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. We're going to look at verse 20. And we're going to read that verse. O Timothy, this is Paul talking. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science falsely so called. Science falsely so called. That is evolution. That is the globe. It's a whole lot of stuff. Science that is falsely so called. It's not real science. It's not true science. It's made up to perpetuate a lie. And people will say, well, what is this lie? Why would they lie about this? Well, like I said, from the very beginning, Satan has been trying to confuse people, to do whatever he can to pull people away from God. And the best way to do that is to discredit his word. I believe that the King James Bible is where God preserved his word. I also believe that this book, this Bible, inspired by God, clearly teaches a flat earth. Go back to my Flat Earth Part 1 for more information on that. So why would they lie about that? Again, to discredit the Bible. If they can prove that the Bible teaches something wrong, they could destroy the faith of a lot of people. Fortunately, that's not the case. Now I'm talking about the King James Bible only. The other Bibles you'll find errors and contradictions, but in the King James you will not. So I think it's important that we defend God's word. And I think that God has clearly told us that the earth is flat, not a globe. Not at all. All right? So the true agenda of most scientists, or science at large, isn't so much to give us knowledge of our surroundings, although there's some of that sprinkled in. If all of it was a lie, it would be obvious. So they have to throw in a little bit of truth, so then you'll believe the lies. Okay? But the true agenda is to pull us away. And sometimes they're not even discreet about it. That's the funny part, is that sometimes they are so obviously lying to us that you think, well, that's so obvious that they're lying, it must be the truth. I mean, who would get away with a lie like that? They have. And unfortunately, most people have believed those lies, even in the face of actual evidence. All right? So the true agenda is the New World Order, Satanism, the Illuminati, the Masons. That's what it's about. It's about this global agenda. They talk about that a lot. Global agenda, which should tell you there exactly what they're up to. Let's take a look at some of the stuff that they've told us. Okay, and I want you to look at a common recurring theme in these numbers I'm about to give you, and then tell me what conclusion you come to. All right. So the diameter of the moon is 6. Actually, I'm going to write them down if I can find room, just so you can see it. Nah, I don't have room. So just write this down for yourself and see if you see a recurring theme here. The diameter of the moon is 6 times 6 times 60 miles. Okay, that's what they tell us. Now, I don't believe that, because I think the moon is much smaller, just like I believe the sun is much smaller. But this is what they're telling you. Again, they put it out there right in your face, so blatantly obvious that you subconsciously you think, well, they wouldn't do that on purpose. That so obviously would be a lie. Well, it must be true. All right. From Mercury, the sun is 666 times brighter using the inverse square law. Are you seeing a pattern yet? The Earth's axis, the orbital inclination, supposedly on this globe, the Earth is tilted on its axis. Okay? The orbital inclination is 66.6 degrees. The polar circles, which again on the globe you have your Arctic Circle, the Antarctic Circle, North and South Pole. Okay? The polar circles are 66.6 degrees at the north and the south latitude. 66.6 degrees latitude at the north and south. Do you see a recurring theme here? These numbers? The Earth orbits the sun at 66,000 miles per hour. Earth's circumference is 600 times 6 times 6 nautical miles. The force of gravity is 666 newtons. Do you see how they blatantly throw it in our faces what their agenda is, but people will ignore all of that because, well, the science. No, it's science falsely so called. The true agenda is right in your face. They don't even hide it. They just figure that, well, it's too obvious for it to be a lie. No. If you really look at it, you can see what the agenda is. Now, speaking of, I talked about before how we're going to talk about some laws. There are laws to our universe, or to our the physical aspects of our Earth. I forget what it's called now. Okay? There are certain things that are just constant. They just are. Okay? So we're going to look at Newton's third law. So here's one of those laws. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Okay? We know that. That's just something that cannot be undone. It's a law, not because we say it's a law, but because it's something that always happens. It has to happen that way. Therefore, we give it the title of law. Okay? Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I think most people are familiar with that. You've probably learned that in school. All right, so let's take a look at this over here. I got my little rocket ship. All right. We've got object A, which is the rocket. Object B is the air around it. The force A is the thrust, and force B is the air resistance. Okay? Everybody's familiar with those things, I think. When object A, okay, exerts force A, okay, on object B, Object B exerts force B on object A. Okay, I know that's a lot of circular talk, but it is true. It's a scientific fact, because the rocket is having an action. That's the action. There's an equal and opposite reaction. So let me say that again. When object A exerts force A, okay, on object B exerts a force B on object A. In other words, encapsulated, the reason why this rocket ship can move, one, it's got the thrust, okay, but also because it's pushing against the air resistance also helps to push the rocket, okay, an equal and opposite reaction. You have to have all of these components in order for this to take place. If you didn't have the rocket ship there, then none of this would happen, okay? Those things would be there. There's still air and there's still whatever, but in order for this process to take effect, all of these things have to be in place. Object A, force A, object B, and force B all have to be there in order for this rocket ship to move. That's how planes move through our atmosphere. All right? Okay, but in the vacuum of space cannot be an object and hence cannot offer resistance. Right? We talked about that in the last video. The vacuum of space is the absence of air, absence of atmosphere. So when this tries to exert force or thrust, it wouldn't be able to, because it's in the vacuum of space, right? There'd be nothing for it to push against, okay? The air resistance, there would be no air resistance. There's no force B, okay, necessary for the movement. Rockets cannot move through space. How would we travel from this globe Earth way out here to our little moon in outer space? How would the ship propel itself in the vacuum of space? There would be no air resistance to help catapult it, that equal and opposite reaction to the thrust. It can't. It cannot happen. Again, this is Newton's third law. We know that this is something that cannot be broken. You have to have all four of these components in order for this process to take place. Yet they want to tell us that we can take one of those out and travel through the vacuum of space. That makes zero sense. Even their own laws defy the science they're trying to perpetuate, the science falsely so called. It's just amazing to me that we know these things to be true, yet we will also believe the things that supposedly can take place outside of what we know to be true. I don't get that. But that's because we've been brainwashed. We've been taught it for so long that we'll accept the impossible. We'll accept the impossible. Even with all the evidence saying otherwise, we'll still believe the lie. Because it's coming from an authority. Your teacher, your professor, your doctor, your scientist, whatever. Your government. This, again, just like all the rest of these, how would they explain that? How can they explain that? They can't. They would be in defiance of Newton's third law. And you can't. Dr. Augustine Piccard. I find that ironic. Dr. Augustine Piccard, that his last name was Picard, and that in Star Trek, The Next Generation, their captain's name is Picard. Again, it's one of those things, it's almost like it's a slight, is what I see. Because obviously in Star Trek, they believe in a globe Earth, and they're traveling through outer space, and that's fine. It makes good science fiction, okay, but not good science. But this guy, Piccard, Dr. Augustine Piccard, 1931, was the first man to reach the stratosphere. And we talked about that last time, the different layers to our atmosphere. Okay, so he was the first one to make it to the stratosphere, which I should have looked up how high that is. I didn't. You can do that. Anyway, it's high enough to where you can see the Earth as a whole. All right? And what did he say? He said it seemed a flat disc with an upturned edge. He was high enough to see all of the earth at one time. He did not see a globe. He saw a flat disk with an upturned edge, which is what we've been saying, what I've been saying in these flat earth videos. It's like taking a frisbee upside down. Flat disk, upturned edge. That would be the ice wall right here. That is the upturned edge. Let me ask you something. Why is it that we, civilians, are not allowed to travel to Antarctica? Why is it that they keep that such a restricted area? Now, Admiral Byrd went there, and he, in his journeys, in his observation, said that the size of Antarctica was much larger than what they perpetuated to be on a globe Earth. He said, no, it was much bigger than that. Why? Because if he sailed all the way around Antarctica, he sailed all the way around this flat Earth. He knew when he got done that his observations, his demonstrable evidence, proved a flat Earth, not a globe. And they did everything in their power to discredit him and to make him look like he was insane. When the fact of the matter is, he was absolutely right. But ever since then, every nation on earth has made this treaty that no one can go to Antarctica. Only government people, government officials can go there. If you try to fly over Antarctica or sail your boat there, they will turn you around really fast. Why? What are they hiding? What is there to hide? Why can't I travel freely to Antarctica? Well, because Antarctica goes all the way around our flat Earth. It's the upturned edge. It is the ice wall. Okay? We talked about this before. Water needs something to contain it. Yes? If I pour water onto a flat surface, it will just spread out. Keep spreading. So what contains the oceans on our Earth? Well, this upturned ice wall. Water has to have a container. This soda has to be in a container. I can't just pour it out and expect to be able to pick it back up and hold it in my hand. It will run through. Okay? It's liquid. It doesn't work that way. It has to have a container. That's why when you buy liquids, they come in a container. Makes it real convenient, doesn't it? Well, how would the water on the Earth stay contained? Well, they're going to tell you, well, gravity. And again, we talked about that last time. If the gravity is strong enough to hold trillions of gallons of water to the bottom of this globe, then the bird shouldn't be able to fly. I shouldn't be able to jump up and down. I would be defying gravity. Well, gravity isn't real. There is no gravity. It's density. All right? The reason why the oceans stay where they're at is because they're surrounded by a container called the ice wall, called Antarctica. All right? And Dr. Augustine Piccard, oh, it's not Augustine, it's August, doesn't matter. Dr. Piccard, the first man to reach the stratosphere, was able to sit above this Earth high enough to observe its true shape. Okay? The moon. Talked about this before in both videos, but how the moon gives its own light. The Bible clearly says that the moon gives its own light. Scientists will say, no. The moon just reflects the sun's light. Okay, well, reflected light cannot produce sharp shadows. Yet, if you go out on a nice clear night when the moon is full, it will cast sharp shadows. Look at the trees, shadows of the trees or of a house or whatever. They're not blurry and kind of opaque. They're very sharp, like this. Pretend like this is a shadow. Okay, this is very sharp and clear. It's not smudgy and blurred by any means. And when the moon casts its light and produces a shadow, it produces sharp images. Reflected light. If I was to take, if the sun truly was, or the moon truly was just reflecting the sun's light, if it was reflecting that light, the shadows would not be sharp at all. The moon gives its own light. The Bible says so. In science, true science proves it, because reflected light cannot produce sharp shadows. All right? Layers of the atmosphere. We talked about this last time, but I want to go again, talking about these laws. Okay? Again, we have the exosphere, thermosphere, mesosphere, stratosphere, and the troposphere. And then, actually from the bottom up, and then you have the vacuum of space. We talked about if there was no container, why would our atmosphere just not be blown up into the vacuum of space? What contains our atmosphere? Well, the canopy. So, it is a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. I said in the last video we'd be talking about thermodynamics. It is a violation of the second law of thermodynamics to have a gas pressure system next to a vacuum without a container barrier. I used the example last time of a soda can. But in essence, what's that saying is you cannot have an atmosphere next to the vacuum of space and expect for it to stay there. It would dissipate. It would go into the vacuum of space. It would push itself out. The only way you could have your atmosphere contained, staying on the surface that you need, is if there is a barrier. Okay? Violation of second law of thermodynamics to have a gas pressure system, this, next to a vacuum, this, without a container barrier. You need this canopy. And we talked before about hemisphere, okay, which is half of a sphere. This, not this. See, that's the globe, that's a whole sphere, but it's called a hemisphere. Why? Because it's half, right here, from here up. All of this should tell you, again, they're giving us the truth, but then they lie about it so much that people don't know fact from fiction. But the truth is there. You just have to look for it. And you have to have an open mind. You have to forget everything you know or what you thought you knew. All right? Sound. Echoes. All right? Echoes are caused by sound waves hitting a barrier and then bouncing back. Makes sense? This room doesn't do that so much anymore, but before I put stuff in here, when it was just an empty room, if I stood in here and talked, I could hear my own echo. Okay? Which is just sound waves hitting a barrier, the walls, the ceiling, and then bouncing back. That's it. That's what an echo is. So when you hear thunder in the sky and you hear it echo, right? What barrier are those sound waves bouncing off of? If there was no container, this canopy, then you would hear the sound, perhaps, but you definitely would not hear an echo. Because there has to be a container. There has to be a barrier for those sound waves to bounce off of and come back to you. So when thunder echoes, what barrier are those sound waves bouncing off of? Well, again, your canopy, because everything is contained under this canopy. The clouds, the sun, the moon, the stars, all of it, underneath of this. And when the thunder strikes, well, lightning strikes actually, but when the thunder booms in the sky and you hear it echoing, it's because it's bouncing off, those sound waves are bouncing off this barrier, this canopy, and then coming back to us. That's simple. Again, things that you can test and observe and demonstrate. That's science. Not hypothesis and theories and in science falsely so called. There's nothing wrong with having a theory or a hypothesis at all. But the facts have to remain predominant, okay? Unfortunately, the facts seem to get lost because of the agenda. And I talked about that in the last video, what the true agenda to all of this is. I talked about it in the first video too. All right, let's talk about the stars for a second. I have it drawn up here somewhere. Down here. All right. Now, according to the globe system, we have the sun and then Earth rotating around the sun, right? That's, when it goes around one time, that's a year. All right. Well, based on this, when the Earth is here, we would see these stars. When we got over here, we would see a whole completely different set of stars. Okay, we're on the opposite side of the sun, so we would see a different set of stars here than what we see here. That's just common sense. We should see 100% different stars from here to here when we're on the opposite side of the sun. But that's not the case. We see the same stars all year round. Why? Because we're not traveling around the sun. The Earth is stationary. The Bible says so. Immovable. The Earth is still. The sun is what's rotating and moving, okay? And the stars are constant underneath of this canopy. Think about a planetarium. And actually, we're going to talk about that here in a second. Why a planetarium is actually an actual representation, more so than they would like to admit. Seasons, all right? I talked about this a little bit before. The sun is going around kind of like a needle on a record album. But it's also moving downward, okay? And it's also because it's moving around and moving its way out from the Tropic of Cancer to the equator to the Tropic of Capricorn, which obviously as you move out, the circle gets bigger. That goes along with this right here. Go back to the first video and also do some research. Analemma, all right? That is what causes our seasons. That's why, yes, there is a Tropic of Cancer and an equator and the Tropic of Capricorn, but it's not like this one, where the equator here is the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. No, it's out here, and there are circles like this, all right? Excuse me, and as the sun makes its way around like that, getting closer and then getting wider orbits, in other words, that is what causes our seasons. All right? Makes sense to me anyway. Planetariums. I'll say that first and then I want to read something to you. Planetariums, an accurate representation of a real flat Earth. When you go to a planetarium, they can demonstrate everything to you under that dome. Why? Because it's accurate. If we were in a globe, or on a globe, and we had different stars that we would see on different sides of the sun, then they would have to reprogram their entire presentation, right? But they don't have to. Why? Because they know the truth as well as we do. They just don't want to admit it. That we're on a flat Earth with a canopy over us. Everything is contained within it, and it's the sun that's moving around, not the Earth. All right. This article. NASA knows it's flat and stationary. This is an article that NASA wrote. Let me see if I can find a date on it. 1987, January 8, 1987. And I don't have the full report, so there might have been some other stuff they're talking about, I'm sure. But the concluding remarks say this. This report derives and defines a set of linearized system matrices for a rigid aircraft of constant mass flying in a stationary atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. In other words, they were studying aircraft and how it moves, kind of like what I was saying before. If a plane is flying on a globe, it would constantly have to dip its nose some in order to make the curvature. But they don't. You can put your plane on autopilot and it will keep going. Now, if you were on a globe and you hit the autopilot, it would eventually just fly out of the atmosphere. You would die. Autopilot would only work on a flat surface. The absence of having to dip your nose all the time only works here. You start dipping your nose here, you're going to hit the ground. All right? But here, they're studying this, and their own concluding remarks from NASA, you can look this up, Ames Research Center, Dryden Flight Research Facility, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Edwards, California, January 8, 1987. Their concluding remark. This report derives and defines a set of linearized system matrices for a rigid aircraft of constant mass, what I was just saying, flying in a stationary atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth. That's the only way flight, as we know it, works and makes sense. From NASA themselves, you can look this up. See, they know the truth. They know what the truth is. They don't want you to know what the truth is because, again, the agenda is to take you as far away from the Bible as possible, to take you as far away from truth as possible. That has been Satan's goal from the very beginning, to bring as many people down with him as possible. Misery loves company. The devil knows where he's going, and he wants to take as many people with him as possible. And if you can prove that your King James Bible has an error, or a contradiction, then it would mean that this whole thing could be faulty. It would put questions in people's minds. You would have to question just how accurate it is, because if it's wrong about one thing, that means it could be wrong about many things. And that is the goal. That is the goal. But there is no error or contradiction in your King James Bible. The Bible clearly teaches, go back to part 1, that the earth is immovable, it is round, it's a disc, it is flat, and that the sun moves, not the earth, the story about Joshua, and that the moon gives her own light. They say the exact opposite on all counts. Evolution, which is what all of this really is based on, evolutionary science, evolution will always contradict the Bible. It says exactly the opposite. Okay? The Bible tells us that man brought sin into the world, and therefore death. Evolution says, no. Death brought man into the world. Always the opposite. Why is that? Someone's wrong, and I don't think it's God. All right? So, all right, the Bible. Since we're talking about that. Oh, here we go. The Bible tells us the earth is a circle. Isaiah 40:22. All right? Made with a compass, Proverbs 8:27, laid upon a face, Genesis 1:2. It is bounded, Job 26:10, at its ends, Job 38:13, what I was talking about before. It has to be bound, otherwise the water would just run off. Try pouring water on a table and just watch as it spills off. It has to be contained. That's why liquids are in containers. Okay? And so the only way to keep the oceans from spilling off is to have a boundary, this ice wall, which is Antarctica. All right? Does not move, Psalm 93:1, covered by a dome, Genesis 1:6-8, containing the sun, moon, and stars, Genesis 1:14-16. Like I've been saying, it's all self-contained. It's like those snow globes, okay? You know, you shake them up and then the snow starts fluttering about. That is actually, that little Christmas toy is more accurate than 99% of the science that they perpetuate right now, because it's a flat surface with a dome over it and everything is contained therein. That is kind of like what we're in right now, this giant snow globe, okay? And when it talks about God has the whole world in his hands, that's because he can put his hand right here and hold that snow globe right there. That's where we're at. All right? The moon's gravity, all right? This is great too. Will pull on trillions of gallons of water to create the tides. That's what they say, that the moon out here, its gravity is pulling on the water, which creates the tides, which almost makes the earth a little more, not elliptical, I forget the term, but it bulges toward the center, supposedly, all right? But yet it's too weak to pull on clouds and too weak to slow down raindrops, right? The moon is strong enough to pull these trillions of gallons of water away from the earth, creating the tides, but yet it can't stop, it doesn't have any effect on the clouds and the drops of rain coming down from it. Wouldn't the moon's gravity, if it can pull trillions of gallons of water, it should be able to pull those little raindrops right? We would never get any rain, right? Unless you're on the opposite side, I guess, depending where the moon is at. But why? Again, this whole notion of gravity doesn't make sense when you really test it out. I gave you a list last time of 10 different ways you can disprove gravity. Try those out for yourself. If gravity is so strong that it can if the Earth's gravity is so strong, it can prevent trillions of gallons of water from falling off the bottom of the Earth, then nothing should be able to get off the Earth. Birds shouldn't be able to fly. I shouldn't be able to jump. I shouldn't be able to throw a ball into the air. None of that, because gravity would be so strong, everything would be pinned to the surface, just like the water supposedly is, right? And again, if the moon's gravity is so strong that it creates the tides by pulling the water at the equator, then why wouldn't it have that same effect on rain clouds and the rain coming down? Because it's not that big and it's not doing that. It's small. It's up here, not out here. Again, just looking at their own science, the laws of thermodynamics, Newton's law, all these things that we can see and observe, all the things that we know to be absolutely true, and then they'll give us something that defies those things and expect us to believe it. And the sad part is, most people do. Most people do. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't understand why. All right, the Earth's gravity, I just said this, can hold trillions of gallons of water on the bottom of the globe, but doesn't prevent birds from flying or us from standing straight up. That makes zero sense. If it's holding all that water to this ball, that would be a whole lot of force. Look, trillions of gallons of water. Fill up 5 or 6 gallons of water and carry that around for a while. It gets heavy. Imagine trillions of gallons of water, how heavy that must be. And try putting water on the bottom of a ball and not let any of it drip. I mean, without containing it, you can't do it. It's going to fall. The water's going to fall off the bottom of the basketball. That's what should happen on a globe. But they say, no, the gravity is so strong, it can hold those trillions of gallons of water to itself. If that force is so strong, then everybody down here especially should be laying down flat to the ground. And that's all they can do. That's it. Birds are not flying. There's no kite flying either. All these things defy their very own laws. And yet people still believe it. I don't get it. I talked about the flight paths last time. How it doesn't make any sense. Somebody going from Australia to South America, why on earth would you fly to Los Angeles first and then down? That doesn't make any sense. Unless we're on a flat earth and you're flying from Australia and Los Angeles is right along the way. You stop to refuel or layover or whatever and then make the rest of your way down to South America. Those are actual flight laws. Again, flight logs. Those are actual flight plans. These are things you can test, demonstrate, and observe. This is what real science is, okay? The triangulation, analemma, the Selenian eclipse or impossible eclipse, time zones. Okay, we talked about that last time. Our pressurized system next to a vacuum of space. All of these things do not make sense on a globe. They can't happen on a globe. They can't happen as it's been presented to us in our so-called science books. So you have to ask yourself, why are they lying? Well, there is an agenda. I keep saying it. They want to take you away from God and away from God's word. They are pawns of the devil. They may not know it, but I think they do. But that's what they are. That is the goal. That is their agenda. We talked about, was it this time or last time? I think it was this time at the top of this video when we talked about those distances, those numbers, the recurring number that keeps coming up. The diameter of the moon, 6 times 6 times 60. From Mercury, the sun is 666 times brighter. The Earth's axis, the orbital inclination is 66.6. The force of gravity is 666 newtons. Do you not see that they're putting it right in your face? But they make it so obvious that you would step back and say, well, it can't be that. They wouldn't be that obvious about it, would they? Yeah, they would. But they know that people will believe it anyhow. And that's the problem. And it starts from the top all the way down, but, from NASA and government and, like I said, the deep state, the Illuminati and all them, all the way down to your public school system. They're all part of it. Now, I'm willing to admit that there are some people in those systems who may not realize that they're just being used to perpetuate these lies. But it's the responsibility of every person to do the research for themselves. I've given you a good start. I'm not going to give you all the information. You need to do that for yourself. I can stand up here and talk about this all day. Without you putting the effort into it, you have no vested interest in it for yourself. You have to do some research. Okay? Starting here. What does the Bible say about all of this? It does not teach a globe earth. It does not teach that we can travel through the vacuum of space. We talked about that here. How their very own laws don't make any sense. It makes sense here within a pressurized system, our atmosphere, but in the vacuum of space, this cannot work. Ever. Therefore, we cannot, never have traveled through space. There is no vacuum of space anyway. All right. All of this encapsulated comes down to creation versus evolution. That's really what it is. The globe, the way they've manipulated the origins of life, the origins of dinosaurs, they take God's creation and use it, twist it, turn it, take it out of context to perpetuate their own false religion of evolution. And evolution is a religion. It is a belief system. It takes a whole lot more faith to believe that we came from a dot of nothing exploding and everything randomly coming into place than it does to think, oh, there's a being bigger than us who created everything. Everything screams creation. This bottle, I do not believe it's glass, that lightning struck some sand, and over the course of millions of years, this bottle took shape exactly like this. Perfect. No, this was created. And they'll say, oh, well, that's different. You're talking about something non-living compared to what we're saying about life, living things. Well, you add all the life systems that we have, especially reproduction, and it makes your job much harder, not mine. Excuse me. Try to explain those things. How would those things evolve? Why would they evolve? There's a really good book by Michael Behe, Darwin's Black Box. Excuse me, I've read it a couple of times. It can be a slow read at sometimes, but I highly recommend it to everyone. He goes to church, I think he said, but he's not really a Christian per se, so he's not even writing from a Christian perspective. He's just writing from an honest perspective, one of true science. And he uses this really great example of a mousetrap, okay, to disprove evolution. Evolution tells us that things start to evolve slowly over time. Little bits added here and there. The things you don't need, they fall off, whatever. A mousetrap, simple as it is, all of the components have to be there at the exact same time in order for the mousetrap to work. If all you had was the wooden base, well, that wouldn't do anything. The mouse would just run over it. If all it had was the little clipper thing that catches the mouse, but no base, again, because it wouldn't have anything to attach to, it would just run over that as well. Take a look at the human eye. Everything had to come into place at the exact same time in order for your eye to work. If evolution is true, then little bits of your eye would come into play a little bit at a time, but evolution gets rid of things that it doesn't need. If the eye was forming and it didn't have a purpose, you couldn't see with it because all the components are there, it would never evolve to that point. It has to happen all at the same time. Again, read his book. Really, really good. All right, so the whole thing is creation versus evolution. Here's something. I was talking about how much faith it takes to believe in evolution, that a dot of nothing exploded. That in and of itself should tell you just how stupid this theory even is. It's not even a good theory. A dot of nothing exploding? Show me how that happens. Do that now. Stupid. But anyway, amino acids are necessary for human life, for all life. Amino acids are necessary. The chances of amino acids randomly forming themselves into proteins to create life are 1 in 746 with 130 zeros behind it. Okay? So the chances of that happening, this is what that number would look like. It would be 1 in 746 with 130 zeros after it. In science, that's called impossible. That's what that is. That's impossible. 1 in 746 with 130 zeros after it. The chances of an amino acid randomly forming itself into proteins to create life, that already disproves everything that they say after that. Life cannot happen without amino acids forming proteins, and the chances of that happening randomly is impossible. Therefore, none of us would be here. Nothing would be here. But yet, they still perpetuate this lie. How? And why do people believe it? When the science itself says otherwise, the true science. But yet people will still go along with it. Why? Because they want to deny God so badly. They want to disprove God because they don't want to live by this. See, if God created the earth, then he owns it and he can make the rules for it, and he can tell us what we need to do in order to get saved, in order to make it to heaven. Some people don't want to do that. They don't want to do any of those things. So they figure in their own little warped minds, well, if I can disprove this, then I can put that out of my mind and just pretend it doesn't exist. And they're so desperate to disprove God that they'll cling to something that's impossible to happen just for the sake of trying to deny God. That is the true agenda to all of this. So when people ask me, why is it even important what shape the earth is? That's why. No, your salvation does not rest upon if it's a globe or a flat disc. Not at all. Your salvation rests upon trusting in what Jesus did, knowing that he is God in the flesh. However, if we're going to be good Christians, we need to defend his word. We need to know his word. We need to know how to defend his word. And that's what this is all about. So is it important as to what shape the earth is? Absolutely. Because like I said, if this is wrong, if the Bible's wrong about this, then who's to say that the rest of it isn't wrong as well? What parts are true then? Where else did they make a mistake? And if God did make a mistake or lied, then he's no longer God. And then we're all really in big trouble. Okay? That's why it's important. Let's take a look at one last verse. Go to Psalm 146. Psalm 146. All right, Psalm 146. I'm getting used to this new Bible, which I really like, especially the large print. I don't know if you can see it real well here, but for me, this is like a godsend. Okay, this large print is helping my eyes a lot. The other Bible I have, I really like it, other than it's hardcover. I didn't care for that too much. But also it has regular size print, and that was getting harder and harder for me to read. I was tromboning a lot, trying to focus on. Anyway, Psalm 146, verse 6 says, and it's obviously talking about God, which made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that therein is, which keepeth truth forever. So in Genesis 1:1, God created the heaven and the earth. Well, he created heaven, earth, the sea, and all that there is, all that therein is. Everything that we see in its natural form, God created. The heaven, the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, the clouds, the canopy, the trees, the grass, all of that. The Bible clearly teaches that God created all of that. Everything is self-contained. Just like I said, the snow globe. Planetariums. Perfect representation and accurate representation of what our world system, our earth and stars are really what they look like. It's like this right here. Alright? Alright guys. This one didn't go as long as I thought it would, but I'm glad I broke it up into two parts anyway. I want to see if there's anything else I needed to address. I just strongly suggest that everybody go and do some research on this stuff. The stuff that I presented here, but also find some other evidences for flat earth. They're all over the place, okay? If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. Email me, contact me on Facebook. I want to thank everyone again for the subscriptions. They keep going up, the views keep going up, the shares keep going up. Thank you. I ask that you continue to like, share, and subscribe. The goal is to get these videos out to as many people as possible to get them saved. To get them saved. And if you are a saved Christian, what are you doing to get other people saved? You can hand out tracts, you can go soul winning, you can do witnessing. If you're a little more reserved, share some videos. You don't have to step too far outside of your comfort zone to do that. Share this video. Share some of my other videos. Find good men on YouTube, good preachers, ministers, and share their videos too. I'm in competition with nobody. Okay? If you share somebody else's video and they're of sound doctrine, thank you. I don't care who they come from. If you're not saved, again, what are you waiting for? I think the evidence is overwhelmingly on the side of creation. And if you get to the point where you finally realize that science has lied to you and that we are on a flat earth and that the Bible is correct about the creation account, now you have to decide what God, because there are a lot of false religions out there. You need to get to the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then you follow that to God in the flesh, here, Jesus Christ, the means, the only way to the Father. The only way to heaven is to trust on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you have questions about that, contact me. I will be glad to go through that with anyone. Okay? All right, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. Have a great day. Have a great week. I don't know where I'm going from here as far as videos. If you have ideas or suggestions, let me know. If you have an idea or suggestion for a Bible study topic, let me know. I'll look into it, and maybe your idea will be one of the videos. Otherwise, I'll keep looking. There's always something to talk about. It's just I try to find something that's going to help and reach the most people. That's okay. All right, guys. Take care, and God bless.